You good? We, over the last handful of years, started homeschooling the kids, and by homeschool I mean that we utilize a state curriculum that's all online. It's kind of a cool curriculum. Arlene and I become evangelists for it. We've been very pleased. But one of the neat things that I've come to like about it is that when the kids take a quiz, they can retake it later if they don't quite do as well as they probably should, which as you get older, I don't know that I would be as for that as maybe I am when they're younger. Life throws a lot of tests and quizzes your way that you don't always get a do-over, so be prepared, right? But when you're little and you're still learning some of the consequences of those actions and you're still trying to get the information, because that's the goal, right? When they're that age, the goal is to get the information and not leave them behind or fail them if we don't have to. It doesn't mean we pass them because if they don't know the information, but the goal is to make sure we do everything we can to get the information into them. And so I've liked that. There's been one or two moments throughout the last couple of years where we've had to go back and go, hey, let's retake that. Even if it was a grade that might be considered by most parents like, hey, that was a good grade, we might say, hey, listen, we want excellence in this house. An 80 is okay, but let's go back and take it. You can retake it, so let's shoot for 100, right? Just to help, again, instill some of that excellence in our children and some of those values for our kids. And I think testing is a good thing. I think it can be a good thing, right? Life is full of pressure. Life is full of tests, and we find that as we're young and we get exposed to those things, it helps prepare us for a future that is full of moments and opportunities that may not seem like a test, but you've got only one shot at it, and you better deliver, right? Whether that's at work or whether that's at life, whether that's making a big decision like buying a car, buying a house, getting married, like you've got to make a decision, and the proof is going to be in the pudding. You better be ready and prepared for the decision you're about to make. And we've had a good experience here, but it's interesting because all throughout Scripture, God tests his people. It's not uncommon spiritually for God to test his people. We see it all the way back at the beginning of the Bible. God begins to test his people. Now, I don't know how you feel about that idea. Maybe you find that to be a little bit frustrating, that God would dare test his people, that he would dare put them in a situation just to see how they'd respond. But our God does. And I think today we're going to find out that that's actually a good thing. It's actually for our benefits. It's not to torment us. It's not to fill us with shame if we don't pass. It's not to mock us or condemn us. It's to shape us. And so if you've got a Bible, we're going to be in John chapter 6. If you don't have a Bible, there should be one in the seat back in front of you. You can follow along with us there. If you scan the QR code in the seat back in front of you, you can download the Awaken 514 app. Pretty much all the life that we do outside this building happens on the app. We've got an entire chat network there, so all of our teams and small groups coordinate there. There's places where you can ask for prayer and get signed up for events and teams. And it's the life that we do when we're not together. It's how we stay connected on the go. So if you haven't downloaded that, you can. There's a Bible tab on there as well for you to follow along if you'd rather just follow along on your phone. I won't be offended if I see you looking at your phone, even if you're playing games. It won't hurt my feelings. I have ADHD. I get it. Today's story is an interesting one. It's one of two miracles recorded in all four of the biographies of Jesus' life. The other miracle is the resurrection. So this one's pretty big. I mean, if you're comparing it to the resurrection and you're going, hey, obviously the resurrection of Jesus after he was crucified made it into all four of his biographies, kind of a big deal. This one makes its way into all four of those narratives, what Christians call the Gospels. And the reason we call them that is because they're a lengthy narrative about the perfect life, the sacrificial death, and the glorious and victorious resurrection of Jesus Christ, right? So we call them the Gospels because the gospel means good news. It's a message of good news, and we can condense that. There you go, now you can read your Bible. And so we can condense that into just what I just said, right? Jesus loves you so much that he died for your sin and he rose on the third day. Or we can extend that narrative, not change the narrative, but extend it out to give us a little bit more information about that life and that death and that resurrection. And that's exactly what those biographies are. They are an extended version of the gospel narrative recorded by four biographers who are recounting Jesus' life on earth. And so they each kind of take their own perspective because they're writing to a different audience. And so we've been in one of those biographies written by a guy named John, the youngest of Jesus' 12 apostles. And John takes a little bit different of an approach to his writing. Now, what's interesting about today's story is that John's going to take a different approach even to a story that makes its way into the other three gospel narratives. And so we'll get to see not just the macro miracle that Jesus does in feeding thousands of people, but more of a micro understanding of what else was going on in that moment. Jesus was playing 4D chess at any given moment. And we get to see some of that today in this miracle. It wasn't just about the masses and the miracle. There's something more micro going on within the hearts and minds of what he's hoping to shape in his immediate 12 disciples. So, I'm going to just dive right in. We don't need any context, but the reason we kind of took off from John was because I didn't want to get into this narrative like through Labor Day, knowing we had some other stuff. Church picnic was in there in August, and I didn't want to start this narrative and not be able to finish it over the next handful of weeks and then leave you with a 3-4 week gap. So what we like to do is I like to read a little bit, talk a little bit, read a little bit, talk a little bit. Sometimes I'll read 2 words and talk a little bit. I'll get you real excited. We're going to start reading, and then I'll stop you dead and pull you out of the text. So we're going to go line by line today. Let's just jump into this story as John recounts it, and then we'll flip between John's account and Mark's account, another biographer. So we'll flip back and forth. John 6, and then actually, ironically, Mark 6. Okay, here we go. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. So right away, we find out that some time has passed between chapter 5 and chapter 6, which makes sense. It's been about a month. It was more than a month for them. What we found out in chapter 5 is that Jesus left his northern ministry, went to Jerusalem for one of the 3 Jewish festivals, and then he goes back north to Galilee, okay? Galilee was in the north region of ancient Israel, okay? So what we find out is that we don't know what festival he went south for. If it was the Passover, it's been about a year. If it was the Feast of Tabernacles, which is another feast they would have made their way into Jerusalem for, it's been about 6 months. So sometime, when the Bible writes, sometime later, it's been between 6 and 12 months of that last chapter, okay? So we find out that they're north, they're near the Sea of Galilee, and we find out some details. A large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that Jesus was doing on the sick. Now, in the coming weeks, I'm going to unpack that very concept at length, because this idea of the people following Jesus is going to make its way through this narrative very, very heavily. I'm not going to deal with it too much today, but notice the motivation for why they're following Jesus. They're seeing him perform miracles, and they want to see him do a trick. They're very interested in the power that he walks in, but unfortunately, we'll find out later that they're not terribly interested in the man himself. We're going to find out at the end of the text today that they're going to try to grab Jesus and make him king. They believe he's the king that was foretold and promised by the prophets of old, but the problem is they want to make him a political figure. They want to make him a political king to overthrow the Roman Empire. They have no interest in surrendering their lives to Jesus as king. They just want Jesus to be king because he's rolling out the welfare programs. He's feeding the hungry, he's healing the sick, and they don't care about surrendering their life to Jesus. They just want Jesus for what he can do for them, which is why you elect a politician, right? I mean, you elect people because you believe they're going to make your life better. That's what politicians are supposed to do. Whether they do that or not, we can talk about that later. But at the end of the day, that's the only reason they care about this man, Jesus. They see him doing miracles. They see him doing amazing things, enriching their personal lives, and that's all they're in us for. Jesus, what can you do for me? We're going to find out the moment he stops doing is the moment they turn their back on him. That's for the weeks to come. Let's keep going. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was quickly at hand. So this mountain is more like a hill. It's not quite a mountain. He's just overlooking the sea there. Imagine being up at like Kerwinsville Lake, if you've ever gone up there to watch the fireworks. Imagine being up on the hill. I know a lot of cars park. I don't know what road that is off the top of my head, but they park along the side there, kind of looking down into the lake, right? It's kind of like a hill. It's not like he went up on some mountain. He didn't go mountain climbing. It wasn't thousands of feet in elevation. He just kind of went up, and he's overlooking the sea there, much like you'd see it like Kerwinsville Lake here, kind of looking down into the dam. That's a D-A-M, okay? Let's just make sure I don't get in trouble there. And so here's what we find out when we flip over to Mark's gospel, because they've just come off a rather interesting season of ministry, and Jesus has an interest of retreating and doing some discipleship with his disciples. Okay, so Mark 6, here's how Mark would recount this very narrative. We're going to pick it up in verse 30. If you don't know where Mark is or you don't know where John is, you can find it in your index if you'd like to follow along. I'll let you flip there. I should have told you this, but keep your finger in John. We're coming back. A little late for that now. All right. The apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. So we find out just before this, the disciples are out. Jesus had given them power to go out and cast out demons, to heal the sick, to preach the good news of the kingdom of God. And so these guys are out doing ministry, like frontline kind of ministry. And so they come back to Jesus. And this is one of the reasons Jesus wants to retreat. You're going to find out. He wants to hear how their experience was. He wants to maybe teach them and refine their understanding of that experience. And so that's what we find out. Verse 31. And he said to them, "Come away by yourself to a desolate place and rest a while. For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat." I don't know if you've ever had a day like that where you just skip lunch because you're so busy, but apparently that was the kind of day they were having. And they went away into the boat to a desolate place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they ran there on foot from all of the towns, and they got there ahead of them. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. And when it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the hour is now late. Send them away to go to the surrounding countryside and villages to buy themselves something to eat." Okay, let's get back to John. We'll be back in Mark in a moment, but let's get back to John. So this is the context that we're coming up here. We know it's Passover. We know Jesus went up on the hill. We know the guys just came back from doing some frontline ministry, and Jesus wants to retreat a little bit. But then the crowds find him again. I don't know if you ever had a day like that where you're just tired, and all of a sudden you're like, I got to get up off the couch after work. I got to go. We got meetings to do. We got places to be. We got kids' sports and activities. Like, you just need a minute to debrief with your spouse. You just need a minute to decompress by yourself. Some of our extroverts in here have no idea what I'm talking about. You're like, people, yeah, of course. I don't need to decompress after peopling. I'm good. Let's go people some more. No, but Jesus wants to debrief with these disciples, and they don't get a moment to do that. The crowds find him. They start coming out from all of the villages. Historians believe there were like 250 different villages in that region where the people were coming from. I mean, thousands and thousands of people have heard about Jesus in Jerusalem. They've heard about the miracles. And then we find out that Jesus then shows compassion on them, and he begins to teach them, and he begins to heal them. And he spends the whole day himself now doing ministry amongst these thousands of people, to the point that the day starts to tick by and nobody's eaten. It's late in the day. Y'all thought I preached long the last 2 weeks. This dude kept them till dinner. I mean, I might keep you through lunch, but I definitely never kept you till dinner. I'm also not Jesus, so there's that. He keeps going, verse 5. Lifting up his eyes, then in seeing the large crowd that was coming to him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat?" Now, this is very similar to the way Mark records this story. Jesus looks up, he has compassion on the people, and they begin to have a conversation about where they can find food. Here's how Mark records it in 37. The disciples are coming to him. They see them, and in 37 he says, Jesus answered them, "You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "Shall we go buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to the people to eat?" And he said to them, "How many loaves do we have? Go and see." And when they had found out, they said, 5 loaves and 2 fish. So something interesting begins to happen here. Jesus has a dialogue with his disciples. Specifically, we find out from John that it's not just all of the disciples, but he's kind of directing this conversation to one very specific disciple, Philip. Now, commentators kind of speculated as I was doing some research this week as to why he went to Philip. Some said, well, Philip's a logistics guy. He was the logistics guy for them. He's like the ops guy. You want him when you're trying to build out operations and figure out how to execute on a good plan. Philip was your man. That was your guy. So, of course, he's going to ask Philip about logistics, right? Maybe. I think we can see some of that personality trait as we understand who Philip is, but the text doesn't tell us. Some just looked at it and said, well, Philip is from this region, so he would know the region really well, and he might have an idea of where they can actually buy some bread, like it was legitimate, like it was an actual question. Philip, could you tell me where we can find a baker who can bake for thousands and thousands of people? Text still doesn't tell us. It's speculation. Here's what the text tells us is Jesus' actual motivation. He said to, let's go back to verse 5. Lifting up his eyes then and seeing the large crowd was coming towards him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that the people may eat?" And he said this to test him, for he himself already knew what he would do. He didn't ask Philip because Philip was a logistics guy. He didn't ask Philip because Philip lived close by and might actually have a real answer. Jesus already had a plan in mind. And so he's asking Philip somewhat of a hollow question that he already has an answer for. And he does it because his goal is to test Philip. Now, this might seem uncomfortable, maybe even a little bit unfair, like he's setting him up to fail. Like Philip's like, why? You already had an answer. Why are you setting me up to fail? Just a side note here, Philip's going to fail this test. This is Philip's response. 200 denarii would not be worth, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them, even to get a little. 200 denarii, you get about a denarii a day, so you're looking at about 7-8 months' wages. It's a lot of people we got to feed. When I was at a wedding last week, I don't think it cost them 8 months' wages to feed the guests. It was a wonderful dinner, wonderful wedding. 8 months' wages is a lot of money. 8 months' wages is a lot of food. There's a lot of people we need to feed. Matthew, in his account, is going to tell us that there were 5,000 men, not including women and children. So we're upwards of, on a conservative number, 15,000. If people have multiple kids, which they did in that culture, figure 25,000 people to be safe. That is a big dinner. That is a lot of food. And a problem for Philip is he looks at the problem. He starts processing how they might solve the problem, and he realizes this problem's too big. Now, what's crazy about this moment, when we think about trying to judge Jesus for his approach to shaping and molding these intimate conversations with his disciples, is that he knows their hearts, and he knows where they're weak, and he knows where they're strong, and his plan for them is to stretch their faith a little bit. And what's wild about this moment is that these guys have just come off, one would assume, some kind of ministry high, right? Like, you guys were casting out demons, you were healing the sick, you were preaching the kingdom of God with authority. You would think they would be like spiritually high from this. Like, they would be like, man, through Christ, we can do anything. And then the first time they hit a roadblock, all Philip can see is the problem staring him right in the face. He can't get past the problem. It gets worse because they just spent the whole day with Jesus. They come back, they regroup with Jesus. Jesus is like, hey, I want to just have a debrief session. Let's hear how it was. Highs, lows, what went well, right? Let's do like a 4-square assessment. What went well, what didn't go well, right? Kind of SWOT analysis for those of you in like business, right? You're like opportunities, threats. They don't get any chance to do that. Jesus gets swamped with people. So what's he do? He shows compassion on these people who you'll find out later just want him for his stuff. And he spends all day, once again, healing, teaching with authority, most likely casting out demons. And then they're met with a problem. And Philip can't see past the problem. He can't even widen his gaze to see Jesus as part of the equation. All he sees is there's no way we could get enough money to feed these people, and there ain't no baker that's going to bake that many pizzas. It's just not going to happen. So Jesus tests him. He tests him to reveal, because here's the thing. Philip doesn't realize he has a blind spot. I mean, that's what a blind spot is, isn't it? It means you're blind to it. You can't see it. Everyone else can. And it doesn't mean it's not there, right? Like if you've ever had a car sitting in your blind spot, that car is there. Move over, you'll find out. They'll lean on the horn, right? Philip doesn't see the blind spot. And Jesus cares too much about him to let him sit as though he's assessing the situation properly. Now, I don't know about you, and I don't know what's going on in your life right now. Some of you, maybe I do, but certainly not to the full extent of what you are aware of in your own world. Do you only see the problem, void of Jesus' power? Do you only see the problem? Can you only see what you can rationally conclude is in front of you? Because we get another rational account, another great thinker amongst Jesus' disciples. Mark then tells us, right, that when they came to him and they were like, hey, 200 denarii wouldn't even be enough to buy food. Jesus says, okay, do me a favor, go out and see what resources we have. And it says he sent them out, which is even more infuriating that he's playing games with them, isn't it? Like, first, He asks them a question he already knows the answer to and already has predestined what he's going to do. He already knows what he's going to do. I'm going to feed these people with a kid's snack pack lunch. But before I do that, let me ask you guys, what do you think? Well, we don't have the money to do it. He's like, okay, do me a favor, go out, and I want you to check amongst the people to see what resources we have. And then Andrew comes back and gives his report. Verse 8. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, there's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are those for so many? Now, Andrew almost gets it right. Like, if he had stopped halfway through that sentence, we could have been like, Andrew's the hero of the story. He's like, hey, this kid's got some biscuits and some tuna fish. Go ahead, Jesus, work your magic. But he doesn't. He keeps talking. He just keeps talking, and he gets himself in even more trouble. He goes, this isn't going to be enough. I mean, if I'm Jesus, I'm like, you guys got to be kidding me right now. You're watching the lame walk, the blind see, demons cast out. And this kid's crackers and tuna fish. You don't think that's going to be enough in the hands of Jesus? So Philip sees only the problem. And then Andrew comes along and he sees resources, but they're not enough. I don't know if either one of those 2 guys connect with you, but I guarantee you they probably speak to both sides of our personality. Like, I don't know about you, but I've been in those situations. No matter how many miracles, no matter how many amazing things I've seen God do in my lifetime, but there's been moments in my life where I seem to rubber band back into my doubt, and all I can see is my problem. I'm overwhelmed with the details of my problems. They weigh on me emotionally, right? You've been there? You're blind to those things. You can't see beyond what's directly in front of you, putting pressure and anxiety on you in that moment, in that instance. And then there's other moments where you're like, okay, here's the problem and here's the resources, but it's not enough. You almost despise the resource because you can't imagine God could use that for his purposes. And Jesus isn't satisfied with either of these answers. It's almost as if the reason to go out into this crowd of thousands of people and figure out what resources they had amongst them was just so Jesus could amplify the point, I'm about to do something bigger than you can comprehend with your logical mind. Because your logical mind will see the problems. If you're an operations guy, like I'm wired that way. I see problems, and what brings me to life is finding solutions. Like, I'm not a creative guy. Like, I don't write songs. You don't want me to do that. I don't paint pictures. Like, you give me a blank canvas, and it's the fastest way to shut me down. Like, I paint something, draw something. I'm like, what do I draw? Like, I don't have a picture in my mind. I'm like, well, there's dolphins, there's rainbows, there's mountains, there's elk, I could go on for days. What do I draw? I don't like blank canvases. I like problems, and then I like to solve them. On my days off, I play games that make me solve problems. Just on my phone, nothing complicated, right? I just veg out and do stupid things. But that's what brings me to life. I get it. I get seeing the problem. And there's times where you have to see the problem, but not devoid of the God who's over the problem. And then I see resources. I'd like to think I'm fairly optimistic. Squeeze $1 out of a quarter. I like that. I could do that. That's fun. That's a way to problem solve. Stretch resources beyond what they should do. I mean, it's a challenge worth taking on. Sure. But sometimes you just look and you go, the resources aren't there. I don't see a way out of this predicament. I've scavenged everywhere. I've flipped over every rock. I've talked to every person, and we don't have the resources among us, Jesus. That's all we got. A couple of loaves, a couple of barley loaves, which were like poor man's bread. Wasn't even the good stuff. Not like banana bread. No. Y'all don't eat pumpkin bread? What do y'all eat? Like gluten-free wheat bread? Like gross. Get it out of here. I mean, it may be expensive bread, but it's not good bread. I mean, don't try to convince me. We've kind of moved gluten-free. Marlena keeps trying to buy like gluten-free pasta and convince me. I'm an Italian, okay? She tries to convince me it's real pasta. And she sneaks it in from time to time. She goes, what'd you think of dinner? I'm like, I can tell. It's not real pasta. You're not sneaking that in on me. I know. I dream about pasta, okay? It's in my veins, okay? I'm made of like 50% linguine. So nope, We're just gonna keep going. I'm not even gonna keep. Okay, so hey, so you're getting me off track here. You're distracting me. So we see Jesus bringing this to the forefront of these guys' lives and saying, hey, I want you to really amplify this problem. Go out and see if we've got resource. And they can't find it. So they come back and they report, and then Jesus does what Jesus always does. He reveals to them that their faith is weak. Now, before we continue in the story, I want you to understand why this is, because this is really not just a story about the failure of his disciples. It's a story about the love that Jesus has for his disciples. Weak faith will never hold up under the weight of your circumstances. Weak faith will never hold up under the weight of your difficult circumstances. It just won't. It'll collapse and crumble. And to God, that's unacceptable. Because he doesn't want you buckling under pressure. He doesn't want you failing in the face of a sinful, broken world that is going to beat you down. And anybody who tells you otherwise is selling something or looking to inspire you so they can get enough money in the coffers to buy themselves a private jet. At the end of the day, Jesus doesn't die to make you happy, healthy, and wealthy. It's the very reason these people will turn from him in just a moment as we get into this story in the coming weeks. They wanted something from Jesus, and when he doesn't deliver what they want, they turn. God is after your faith. The kind of faith that David demonstrates as King Saul, the tallest man in Israel. He looked like a king. Strong, handsome, taller by head and shoulders above the guys next to him, every other soldier next to him, while King Saul cowers in his castle. A little shepherd boy named David would come out and face the giant Goliath. And if you've ever read the story, it's incredible. David comes out to see his brothers who are fighting in the king's army. He's like, what are we all cowering for? And Goliath is out there in the center of the battlefield, just banging on his armor, banging his shield, making a ruckus. You puny Israelites, come and get me. And David's appalled as the Israelites cower in the back lines. He's like, this man mocks us. More than that, he mocks our God. And he goes out and he slays the giant. David saw the problem, but he saw something greater than the problem. He saw the God who was bigger than the problem. A weak faith will not sustain you in those moments. It's not that you're strong in that moment. David was not strong in that moment. David had God on his side, and the Philistines did not. They worshiped false gods, and David put his trust in the living God. David himself would write in the Psalms, Psalm 66, he would say, "For you, O God, have tested us. You have tried us as silver is tried. You brought us into the net. You laid a crushing burden on our backs. You let men ride over our heads. We went through fire and through water. Yet you have brought us out to a place of abundance." Now, I don't know if you know anything about refining silver or precious metals. They heat it up so that all the impurities, as the metal becomes a liquid, all the impurities begin to boil to the surface, some of which burn out from the heat. The rest, they skim off the top. And the idea was that when you could see your reflection like a mirror in the silver, which is what they use to make mirrors, they silver the back of mirrors and then they paint them. If you could see your reflection in the silver, then the impurities had been burned out. David's saying, God, you tested us that you might burn out the impurities. But it's not just that he's recognizing what God's doing. He says, prove me in Psalm 26, O Lord. Try me, test my heart and my mind. David's not just acknowledging what God does, he's asking for it. That's a terrifying request. To have God start to refine you and prove that your faith may be lacking. It's so much easier to live in ignorance, isn't it? I mean, ignorance is bliss. To assume we have faith when we don't, to assume we have no blind spots, no sin, no areas of weakness, no places of bitterness. no unforgiveness, unrepentance. Just rather live in ignorance. And honestly, it's one of the most dangerous things plaguing the American church today. We live in willful ignorance, unwilling to ask the hard questions of our heart and allow God to boil those impurities to the surface. Instead, what happens is when these things come upon us, we get angry at God that he would even allow it. Now, God does not send evil. He does not send calamity upon his people, but he does test them. And he does use what the enemy intends for evil to crush you, to refine you. And he imparts to you his Holy Spirit that you might be empowered in those moments. That you don't need to cave to temptation or weakness, but you can stand in the strength of the God who is. He would say in Psalm 139, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way of everlasting." Now, Peter, who we just heard Andrew, right? Andrew was the guy who could see the resources, but doubted that they would ever be enough or that Jesus could use those resources and multiply them beyond what they should be able to do with them, right? So Peter now writes a letter. And in his letter, he says this to the people he's writing. "In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, which is more precious even than gold, though that perishes and is tested by fire, may be found to result in the praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ." So again, we find out gold being refined through fire, but our faith, which he's testing, and these people that he's writing to are going through various trials at that time as persecution began to increase in the early church. He's saying, your faith is far more precious even than gold. What God wants to do in you is far more precious than whatever comfort you're clinging to, and God wants to rip it from your hands, not because he doesn't love you, but because he loves you. He has something greater for you. Now, we can think about it like this, because there's a lot of places in the world where you do want someone to be tested. For instance, I don't know if you went on any vacations this summer. Maybe you've got one planned for this winter. Escape from the cold tundra of central PA in February, and maybe you're flying south. I hope they test my pilot. I don't know about you. I don't love flying to begin with. But I would absolutely hate if they did not test my pilot first on a flight simulator and then on maybe something a little smaller than a 747. Let's make sure this dude knows how to fly. Don't know if you've had any surgery lately. I've only gone under the knife once in my life. I'm glad that dude's been tested. Don't know about you, but I'm not so thrilled with being cut open. Even less thrilled when the dude's like, I read a book last week. Fair? Those are important things. Knowing how to fly when you're responsible for the lives of hundreds of people on an airplane. Knowing how to operate when you're responsible for the life of the person on your table. How much more important that you find out now that your faith is lacking. How much more important now than when the day of calamity hits, and it's coming. Either on the day of judgment, when your heart finally stops and God calls you home, or in every day before that. I can assure you, if you live long enough, there'll be a day of calamity of some sort. You'll lose a loved one. You'll be injured. You'll get sick. Finances will get tough. You'll be challenged at work. You live long enough, this world is broken. It'll impact you at some point. And those are not the moments to discover that you did not do the hard work of allowing, listen to me, of allowing the Lord to refine you. It's too late to get in the Word at that moment. There's nothing to recall to mind to find encouragement and hope in. Do not despise the work he wants to do in you now. I don't know what your circumstances look like. Some of you may be in trials right now. Don't grow bitter, don't grow weary, and don't despise it. God is working in you for his glory, so that he might see his face and his reflection through you as the impurities and sin of your life are boiled out. So Jesus is going to flex. He sees the weakness in his disciples, despite the fact that they've just been out doing all kinds of amazing miracles. Before I read that, let me read to you what James, Jesus' own brother, would say. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. Steadfastness, when it has had its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Here's Jesus' motive, and here's what he does to push his disciples. Verse 10. Jesus said, have the people sit down. Now there was much grass in that place. So the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to all those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost. So they gathered them up, and they filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, this must indeed be the prophet who has come into the world. And perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. Now, modern commentators who do not believe in the miraculous power of Jesus Christ have tried to rationalize this miracle and explain it away with rational terms. They say things like, well, when the disciples went out, they found there was no bread out there because people were withholding all that they had traveled with. And when they saw the little boy give up his snack-packed lunch, they were moved with compassion. And so as they passed the basket throughout the crowds, people were like, okay, I'll give. Like that would make for a great sermon if we were doing a giving campaign, but it's just not true. It's a design to rationalize the miraculous so that we don't have to sit in the uncomfortable tension that Jesus is God. No, the real miracle is Jesus worked on their hearts. But nothing in the text says that. Nothing in all 4 narratives would give us any reason to believe that. In fact, I don't even know why the disciples would be having the conversation that people need to eat if they knew people were holding food. And people weren't traveling around with backpacks in those days. They didn't have luggage, they didn't have backpacks, duffel bag, gym bag, they didn't have it. Couldn't airdrop, pizza delivery, DoorDash, it just wasn't happening. No, the miraculous here is that as Jesus broke the bread and gave it out, there was more bread to break and give out. How did it work? I couldn't tell you. But we do know that Jesus is the creator, the one who God speaks and Jesus goes out and accomplishes, the one who turned water into wine, the one who speaks to the human body and overturns the disease and the destruction of what death and sin has done. If we can accept the fact that in the beginning was the Word and the Word was with God, all the way back in Genesis when God speaks the world into existence, creates something out of nothing, then this should be an easy miracle to swallow. We don't need to rationalize it, not unless we're trying to undermine the deity of Jesus and pretend like he's less than so we can justify our sinful hearts not following him. Jesus sees the lack of faith in his disciples. Every other disciple, every other author of Jesus' biography recounts the big narrative, the feeding of the 5,000, which we know to be closer to 20, 25,000. John is the one who records the inner conversation with his inner circle, that there's this motive going on while Jesus simultaneously meets the needs of the people who would betray him and reject him ultimately. He's working on molding and shaping 12 men who would change the face of the earth because their formation and their faith mattered. They had a great and beautiful mission that he was calling them to. And before they could go out and stand firm on the good news of Christ, they needed tested and they needed refined. They needed to be made ready for the mission of carrying the good news to the ends of the earth. So my question is, what are you going through? And how are you perceiving it? Are you obsessed with only your problem? Is that all you can see and is that all you talk about? Are you just looking for another listening ear to complain to grab hold of? And look, I'm not saying it's bad to vent to a trusted loved one, a friend, a disciple maker. But there's something about when we're looking for more and more and more and more people to grab hold of their ear, so all we can do is just vent about our problem, that becomes unproductive and becomes a type of dysfunction that doesn't want to actually be refined or see beyond the physical to what God is doing in the spiritual, how he might be refining you through this. Can you see the resources? And you're depressed that they're not enough. Have you grown ungrateful for what God has given you and incapable of believing that God can do abundantly more with what you think is not enough? Have we grown resentful, or have we grown to despise the gifts that God has given us because it's just not enough for us? Because Jesus continues to flex his muscles, and he wants to refine you so that he, in the end, can see his face reflected back at him, that you might image him to the world around you. But that will not happen if we stunt our growth by failing to work Christ into the equation. Your sin is not too great. You cannot stare at your sin in hopes that God might save you and think somehow Jesus could never do. He can never save me. He can never pay for my sin. All I can see is the weight of my sin. We have to see Christ in the equation. The one who died for sinners. The one who resurrects from the dead and could not be held by death or sin. The grave empty. And then his Spirit empowering his church and transforming us into his image. How serious are we about being changed into his image? How committed, how ferocious, how blind, and how unwilling to be confronted in our blindness. We cannot grow if we cannot or will not see our blind spots. We cannot hope to reflect Christ, to be transformed into his image that we might withstand the day of trial if we stubbornly hold on to the problem or despise the resource. Are you embracing what he wants to do in your life? Are you embracing the trial? Or are we growing bitter at the God who loves you enough to refine you?